Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nothing But Nugs podcast, part of the Elevated Pulse family of podcasts by the fans, for the fans, diehards only. I am Chris, and I've got Eric back with me again for week 2 here. How's it going, Eric?
Doing well. Excited to talk some Nuggets.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again a heck of a time to be talking about them. Very interesting first week of the Timberwolves series, and we're going to dive right on into it on this episode. But of course, if you are watching this for the first time, thank you for hopping on this podcast with us. We hope you enjoy the content and the discussion. Just go ahead and give us a like if you like the content. Give us some comments if you think our takes are a little bit out there. Whatever it might be, we'd love to hear from you. But with that said, let's go ahead and dive right on into today's discussion. So obviously, the Nuggets have played 3 games so far in their first round series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And, they find themselves in a very interesting predicament. All right, down in this series 2-1. Solid game 1, all things considered. Game 2 did not go the way they anticipated. They had a nearly 20-point lead at one point in that game, and it completely evaporated. Then they headed out to Minnesota for game 3, and it was even worse than the game 2 situation. And so, my, oh my, do we have a lot to talk about on today's episode. But we're going to frame today's discussion in a different, more unique format today. You see the question of this video: have the first 3 games set the stage for a Nuggets takeover? Some of you might think we're a little bit crazy. Some of you might be genuinely supportive of that perspective. But here we go. We're going to lay out 2 different perspectives for you tonight. Eric might not be as bullish on the Nuggets at this point in the series, down 2-1. I'm going to make the case, in alignment with my prediction last week, why I think the Nuggets are right exactly where they, quote unquote, want to be at this point in time. We got 2 very fun discussions, 2 very fun arguments that we're going to lay out for you. Hopefully you enjoyed this discussion, and we'd love to know which side of this argument you come down on at the end of this episode. So drop that in the comments at that point in time. But with that said, Eric, lay us out the case. Have the first 3 games set the stage for a Nuggets takeover in this series?
Yeah, Chris, I don't see it. I really don't. The Nuggets haven't played well since the first quarter of the second game, honestly. They had that 20-point lead. They saw it evaporate, and you almost got a sense of, I don't want to say it was their heart was pulled out, but that took a lot of wind out of their sails, at least from what I saw and what I was watching. I do have some questions around, some of the guys' minutes. Look, I'm not going to pick on David Adelman. I know he's kind of, rookie coach, even though he had some playoff experience from last year. But he's got a veteran team, and he's got to, play the guys that have got him to this point. And look, I like Spencer Jones as a person, but Spencer Jones starting the season was a 2-way player, and he's a starter in the playoffs. I know that they're limited because of injuries. It's a tough predicament to be in. But you got guys on the bench like Jonas Valanciunas. He's got 2 minutes in this series. 2 minutes. He was supposed to be the guy who comes in and gives Jokic a breather. Clearly, Jokic needs a breather. He's playing. It's not just the minutes Jokic is playing. It's the stressful minutes that Jokic is playing. He's being asked to do a lot more, and he's having to do it against a very good defender in Rudy Gobert, which, look, sometimes people forget he's a 4-time defensive player of the year. That guy can play defense when he wants to, and he has proven it. And I think that whole Timberwolves team has kind of had, a little chip on their shoulder or a little attitude. They love to play the Nuggets for whatever reason. They love this matchup. I think it was the year that the Nuggets won the championship. They started their run against Minnesota. And, if you go back in time and you listen to some of the things that Anthony Edwards said that, came away from that, they took away from that series, from the Timberwolves perspective, that really kind of created that this is a budding rivalry at that point. And now here we are, a couple years later, and this rivalry is full fledged. And it is time, I think, for the Nuggets to step it up. They got punked by Jaden McDaniels. He called people out by name, which you just don't hear in the NBA that often. He called people out by name and told them exactly what he thought when it came to how they, play defense. And he backed up his talk. So, I think Minnesota has a lot rolling right now. I'm not saying that the Nuggets can't do it. They've obviously been here. I saw a quote from Christian Brown earlier today that they're comfortable in that locker room. They've been here. They know what they're doing. It's the people outside of the locker room who aren't comfortable. And I would agree with him. It is the people who are outside of the locker room, like myself, who are not comfortable after, taking a beating like they took last night. That was a tough game to watch. I will be honest with you. Between the NFL draft, the Avalanche playing, and the Nuggets were third on my TV list for a large portion of that game. So, that's kind of my initial thoughts. Love to kind of hear your side of the argument. I do. Deep down inside, do I want the Nuggets to win this series? Absolutely. I'm a diehard Nugget fan. I want them to win this series. I think they can win this series. I just don't think they're in the position to say we've got them right where we want them.
Yeah, fair enough, man. That is a solid argument to lay out. Obviously, most of Nuggets Nation right now probably agrees with you. Let me tell you why the opposite might be the case here. So, no expected turnaround coming from your perspective. I think the turnaround is coming. And I have a 7-pillared argument to lay out for you. We'll dive into this later on. But for right now, the 7 general pillars of my argument are this. I mean, we talked about before hopping on this episode, the idea of the shooter's fallacy. The idea that it's completely not in alignment with basic statistical theory. But the idea that you have a good shooter and a good shooter might not be having a good game or a good stretch. And for whatever reason, in the most clutch moment, let's say in this hypothetical scenario, let's say he's like 0 for 8, 1 for 9, 2 for 10 in the game. He wants the ball in his hands. And the coach thinks he's a little bit crazy. But nonetheless, he's one of your best players. He's one of your best shooters. And you give him the ball and he makes the shot because he was super confident that he was going to make the shot in that situation. And the coach asks him after the fact and he says, "Why were you so sure that you were going to make that shot?" And the shooter says, "Well, I missed my first shot," which is a pretty typical, right? I missed my second shot, which was getting a little bit abnormal. I missed my third shot. And now I was in a situation where I was like, okay, this is really not normal. I'm more likely to hit the next shot now that I've missed the first 3. Repeats the pattern for the 4th miss, 5th miss, 6th miss, etc. And so it's this idea that the more a good player or good players struggle over time, again, completely out of alignment with statistical theory, the more they struggle, the more expectation they probably have on themselves and that we should have of them, that they're more likely to get back to the status quo and potentially even in a big way. And so that is really an important part of the perspective that I have here, because we're talking about the best offense in the league this year, one of the historically best offenses of all time during stretches this season. And what did you have in game 2, kind of, and especially in game 3? You had Nikola Jokic have arguably the worst playoff performance of his career, especially in game 3. Okay, 27% from the field out of the best all-around offensive player in the league, the most efficient player in NBA history. Is that likely to keep up? Who knows? History might suggest that if he gets back to his sort of regression of or if he regresses to the mean right around 52% from the field, I mean, it's that you would take that out of him, obviously. And he's obviously demonstrated that he can put up high 50s and 60s in terms of field goal percentage, even in big games historically. As far as the team overall shooting, we said that shooting from the 3 would be important in this series. They've shot 30% from the 3-point line so far in the first 3 games of this series. Do we expect that to continue significantly throughout the course of this series? I don't know. Got some good shooters on this team. Jamal's obviously known for stepping up when it comes down to it in the playoffs. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been a sharp shooter for this team in the playoffs. Guys like even Cam Johnson have stepped it up in recent weeks. And so do we expect the Nuggets to continue shooting about 9 or 10 percentage points below their season average from three? Not necessarily sure. As far as the second chance points with Minnesota, just absolutely crushing the Nuggets in second chance points, especially in game 3 again. You have to figure if Aaron Gordon is able to come back for the rest of this series, and it seems like that's the expectation, which is why he sat out game 3. You do have the ability to get back to fighting for those rebounds. Aaron Gordon is arguably your best offensive rebounder. Not having him is really, really not a good situation for you to find yourself in against a larger Minnesota team, assuming he plays in game 4 and assuming Valanciunas gets some more rotational minutes, which he really does need to have. I think those second chance points could get cut down. As far as some of the adjustments that could be made, again, Minnesota only scored 113 points in game 3. Right? They are scoring right around the general average that they've had so far in this series. It was the Nuggets who were unable to put up their typical offensive output or anything close to it in game 3. And I mean, it seems like that's the relatively easier fix for them to make. Get back to playing the very highly physical, active offense that we know that they can play because they've demonstrated it before. And so all of these things combined, it feels like the Nuggets are kind of just not playing up to their typical standard. Minnesota is playing at their typical standard. We're not getting anything incredibly excellent from them necessarily, maybe a little bit more on the defensive end. But all things considered, if the Nuggets can just put together some better offensive rotations and get into their sets and play with a little bit more physicality on offense, they can create some better looking shots. They can take some of that pressure off of Jokic. And I think there's a good likelihood they not only win game 4 tomorrow, but go on to win this series in 7. So that's my general thought as to why the Nuggets should be able to come back and beat the Minnesota Timberwolves. But let's dive into your argument a little bit. You mentioned rotations briefly. Tell us specifically what you think the rotations are currently missing and what changes you think that they should make, that Coach Adelman and the coaching staff should make.
Yeah, so I'll start out by saying, well, first, I don't know if this is breaking news. I saw it about an hour before the podcast started. They did announce Aaron Gordon out for game 4. So that's a bummer. Obviously, that creates a hole for us that we're going to have to fill. But digging into the rotation, so we got to see. Sometimes it's be careful what you ask for, right? Because I said after game 2, the guys who are, who are hurting the Nuggets were DeSumo and guys like Bones Highland coming off the bench. I know Bones didn't have like a great offensive game in game 2. He was a little better in game 3. But if your thought is, okay, we're going to put Spencer Jones on those kinds of guys to guard them, that's just that's a recipe for failure. Spencer Jones is the guy who can play a little bit stronger, play with the Julius Randles of the world down underneath maybe a little bit. I'm talking on the defensive end. Even maybe McDaniels, but he's not quick enough to handle a guard that's dribbling the ball. I was disappointed that we saw no Julian Strawther in the first 2 games, really. That's what I'm saying. It's be careful what you ask for, because we saw Strawther last night and he didn't do what I had hoped he would do, at least certainly not from the offensive side. But I felt like he played, he's just quicker. Now, my theory goes out the window when you see what DeSumo did last night when he came off the bench and, scored 25 points and had 9 assists and, essentially took the game away from a bench standpoint from the Nuggets. But my biggest issue has been around Valanciunas. We talked about it last week that the Timberwolves are a big physical team. They're going to play a physical style of defense, whether that's Gobert, whether that's Julius Randle, even the guards. They're DiVincenzo. They're very physical. That pounding that Jokic and Murray are taking in just bringing the ball up the court. you can see it wears on them and they're getting tired. And you saw it in in game two at their shooting percentage in the fourth quarter. Those shots, I think everybody in Nuggets Nation was just waiting for Jamal Murray or Jokic or Nikola Jokic to hit one of those shots late in the game. What did you see happen? Jokic deferred to Christian Brown. I didn't expect that. When it came to crunch time shot, I thought, okay, that's a shot Jokic shoots 10 times out of 10. Then we get the ball back. I think we're down 3, if I'm not mistaken, maybe down 4. I can't remember the exact scenario, but Jamal comes down and he shoots, I'll call it roughly an 18-foot jump shot with 10 to 12 seconds left on the clock. Now I get it. We're trying to get a basket up to create a foul, to stop the clock, have them shoot free throws and kind of play that free throw game. But he missed that shot. And then it was ultimately, they got the board and DiVincenzo dunked it to end the game. But those are shots that we are used to seeing them hit. And I know you just kind of talked about, the law of averages and statistically, we're just not going to usually see Jokic have an all-time terrible game, Jamal Murray have, an all-time terrible game on the same night. Where I look at it is you've got to give a lot of credit to Minnesota and their coaching staff and the players to find that, that whatever it is, to find that little niche that really disrupts everything from the get-go. When they put pressure on the ball, it doesn't matter who's bringing the ball up for the Nuggets. Jamal Murray, Bruce Brown, Jokic, even when Gordon was playing and was bringing the ball up, they always had a guy pressuring the ball coming up. The Nuggets couldn't ever get into their offense. You could see Gobert playing Jokic at the top of the key. I know we run that top of the key screen with Jamal and Jokic a lot, but a lot of times it leads to people being open elsewhere, and those guys they're not open elsewhere. Christian Brown's not hitting open shots. Jamal Murray hasn't hit a 3-pointer in the last 2 games. I get it. That's a statistical anomaly, and you hope that he's going to get better. But to me, the credit is more on what Minnesota is doing defensively to stop the Nuggets versus us just having bad games. I think when it comes to shot making, yes, these guys are all-stars. Jokic and Murray, they're all-stars. You don't expect them to have night in and night out, bad game after bad game. I mean, like you said, I think statistically, the game last night was Jokic's worst statistical playoff game that he's had in his career. 27% shooting from the floor. I think he was 7 for 26. That's obviously not going to get it done. Coming into game 3, what I liked about the Nuggets to start the game, Jokic was shooting the ball. My issue with him in the first half of I think it was game 2, I think he only had like 3 or 4 shots in the first half. And if Jokic is only going to play a half of basketball where he shoots the ball on offense, that's not a good recipe for the Nuggets. And the reason for that, the reason he wasn't getting those shots up is because he had a defender in his face. He wasn't able to get to the spot on the floor that he likes to get the ball and to shoot the ball. And to make matters worse, when he would pass, we weren't knocking down the open shot. So that compounded the problem. And for the Nuggets, I think those are things that they're going to have to fix. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like, at least for game 4, it doesn't look like Aaron Gordon's walking through that door. It doesn't look like Peyton Watson is going to be walking through that door. So they're going to have to find something internal that they're going to be able to count on, whether that's a Julian Strawther game, whether that's a Jamal Murray game, whether that's a Christian Brown game, a Cam Johnson game, or the old reliable, hopefully Jokic can turn it around. Look, the guy shot close to 60% in the regular season. So a 30% game, under 30% game, I think is an anomaly, but They can't just all have off nights on the same night. I think is ultimately the bottom line, and that looks to be what happened in Game 3. But to me, it was more excellence on the side of Minnesota's defense and their coaching staff, really having them prepared to play the Nuggets the way that they know really ultimately affects the Nuggets by putting pressure on the ball.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a conversation I had in a comment section with someone after game one. I said that seeing that Ant is a little bit injured, maybe not even a little bit, maybe a lot bit injured, relatively speaking, it did feel like Minnesota was going to lean more into their defense in an attempt to stop the Nuggets more, obviously, and just to win games, given that their best offensive player is not his best offensive capable self. And so we saw that in game 2. We saw that even more in game 3. But I feel like game 3, I mean, we're talking about rotations still kind of, right? And I checked recently. It looks like Gordon is questionable for game 4, which is the same status he had when he missed game 3, right? So it's understandable that he might not play in game 4. But I mean, well, I guess we'll see. Game 4 is a very pivotal game in this series. We've seen him do more with less. If you think back to the OKC game last year, now obviously he got himself hurt and missed the most important game of that series by playing with an injured hamstring. But I mean, it's possible that he just decides to push through if this injury is not as bad as last year's. But even aside from that, that was really the reason why Minnesota was able to just absolutely crush defensively. I mean, we talked about this in our episode last week. The Nuggets, we like the small ball lineup, but you can't put the small ball lineup out there against their starting lineup. Their starting lineup is too big. Yep. And so it'd be very interesting to me to see how Jonas Valanciunas is used. If you're David Adelman, the clearest possible thing you could do right now and realize right now is that you have this guy who you're paying $10 million a year to be your backup center. You have him sitting on your bench. You haven't used him much this series. You've seen in game 3 that your offense is just absolutely incapable of doing anything in this current undersized position. And so Aaron Gordon was a really critical part of keeping guys like Rudy Gobert guessing, right? Guys like Julius Randle guessing on some of those rotations. Because, I mean, Aaron Gordon can play everywhere. He can shoot threes. He can play in the paint. He's a Randle stopper. He just causes problems everywhere. And so without that guy, you really do have to, in some sense, play as if you're playing like Minnesota did in game 2, where you're like, our offensive abilities are kind of hindered. We need to really lock it in defensively. Hey, Jonas, go out and I'm not saying they should start the double bigs lineup, but it'd be interesting to see if the double bigs lineup gets any significant minutes tomorrow, because you need somebody who can go out there and relieve some of the pressure off of Nikola Jokic so he can effectively facilitate without having to worry about Gobert primarily, and then Randall also. And so you got to give Jokic more flexibility in this current offensive system that's a little bit hampered right now by that injury, and also not having Peyton Watson as well. It doesn't help. So I think it'd be interesting to see how many minutes Valanciunas gets tomorrow, because he needs to get a significant amount. You can't start Spencer Jones against that starting lineup. Again, if they go small ball, right, with Highland and Dosunmu and Ant-Man on the court at the same time, then I'm fine with the sort of 3-guard mix there with Murray, Brown, and Spencer Jones. That's fine, because that's a team that can compete. But you don't want to put yourself in a position to have Spencer out there and have that lineup be undersized. And you also don't want Valanciunas to be out there when the Timberwolves go small ball themselves. So it'll be interesting to see how David Adelman manages those rotations. But assuming the worst from my perspective, right? The perspective that the turnaround is coming. Assuming Aaron Gordon doesn't play tomorrow, you're going to need to put some size out there. I get that Zeke Najee kind of played all right in the minutes that he got yesterday, for what that's worth. At a point in time, the game was pretty much over. But do we see him get any meaningful bench minutes? Maybe as a sort of stretch big also. I know he can shoot some threes, theoretically. And so it'll be interesting to see if he gets playing time. I would much rather see Valanciunas get out there and get more playing time than Najee. But that's just me. I'd love to see the double big lineup. If there was ever a time to crack out the double big lineup, tomorrow is the night to do it. One other rotational piece I'll add that is important to my perspective on this is Tim Hardaway. You got to you just have to get something out of Tim Hardaway. I don't know why Tim Hardaway is being used as such a large ball handler for whatever reason with the bench unit. He's really good just coming off of those pin downs, coming off those picks, and then popping threes. You got to get Tim Hardaway good looks. We need a 20, 25 point Tim Hardaway game if we're going to be competitive in this series. I think for either of our perspectives, right? Like you'd love to see Tim Hardaway go out just absolutely launching, and the Nuggets still end up losing this series. But yet you have to get something out of him. He had a solid game 2, I believe it was, where he shot pretty decently. But you just have to do that. You got to get Tim Hardaway activated. You got to get him back in his normal rhythm coming off of actions. That also kind of alleviates some pressure from Joker too, right? Because if you can get Tim Hardaway going with those actions, now Joker has a little bit less pressure on him when he decides to post up Rudy Gobert, because they have to be concerned about a kick out, a legitimate kick out threat. Spencer Jones should also, in theory, be that kind of threat, but for whatever reason, he's just been relegated to corner duty. He's been one of your best three-point shooters all season in catch and shoot situations. And so you would figure if you're Adam and trying to scheme up an offensive attack for game 4, that involves some more Spencer Jones on kick threes that he'll catch and shoot. Definitely some more Tim Hardaway catch and shoot threes, just to relieve that pressure in the paint on Joker, and then maybe open up some cutting actions too. But right now, Minnesota is so big interiorly, that's not even a word, is it? On the interior, that you just need to find a way to shoot the ball, and you can do it. You're a good 3-point shooting team by percentage, even though you didn't shoot a ton of threes by volume this season. They just have to do it. And so I think those are my 2 biggest rotational notes there. Maybe see the double big lineup get some action tomorrow. I would love to see that. And I would also love to see Tim Hardaway get back to being less of a primary ball handler when he's on the court in his usage, and get back to being a sort of catch and shoot 3 guy, also with some Spencer Jones in that role too. But I guess we'll see as far as the rotations go. As far as Minnesota in a vacuum, right? This team, I don't think we expect another 25-point outing from Ayo Dosunmu. And so for that reason, I mean, are there any other guys out there that the Nuggets really just have to neutralize, besides obviously like Ant-Man and Julius Randle, right? Are there other role players that you really think the Nuggets need to really prioritize, either offensively or defensively, and just go at? Maybe on the offensive end, get them in foul trouble. On the defensive end, really make sure that they're not letting them slip out of the defensive eye. Are there any guys like that stand out to you right now for Minnesota?
I mean, that's a great question, and it's a difficult one to answer because nobody counted on Dosunmu coming in and doing what he did. That primarily can't happen. You can't have a guy who averages 7 or 8 points a game come in and drop 20, 25, and 9 on you and expect that that's going to be okay. So that's first and foremost. We need that off of our bench. We can't let that happen off of their bench. In the comments, DiVincenzo, I would say between him and McDaniels, those 2 guys are the guys who we've got to attack. Now, it's hard to attack them. Why? Because McDaniels plays such an aggressive style of defense where Jamal Murray has no room to operate. You see it out there. He is locked up from the second he crosses half court to anytime he moves. He's got him essentially in his jersey. But you asked, is there, if we can pick up, go at somebody and maybe get them in foul trouble, I think he's kind of the head of the snake, to be honest with you. If we can get it to where Jamal kind of has some freedom and ability to move with or without the ball, and be able to find those open shots and gain some confidence with Jamal. It's not just Jamal, with any shooter. When you see the ball go in, you gain confidence pretty quickly. That's something that the Nuggets haven't seen happen, especially Jamal and Jokic in the last game and a half. They haven't seen the ball go in very much. So it becomes more and more difficult when you see every shot rim out. And confidence is kind of one of those weird things, and especially in the NBA, you got guys who they do this for a living. They shoot literally thousands of shots on their off days, and they are able to, if it were you or I versus them out there playing a pickup game, they're not going to miss a shot, right? But when they are competing against guys who are at their level, it's a different thing, and confidence can go a long way. So I feel like if we see Jamal or Jokic making some of their early shots, it just changes the game. It makes the Timberwolves have to back off a little bit on defense. Right now, they can be overly aggressive and not really have to not really have to worry about the consequences because we're not hitting shots. Now, the other thing with DiVincenzo, we've got to do a better job at staying on him. He finds his way. He's able to find those open spots, and most of the time, I don't know what his shooting percentage is in this series. I didn't look it up, but he's been pretty knocked down. When he gets that open shot, he's hitting it, and that's a guy who we've got to make sure. It's not. I don't think he's really had a blow up game where he's had more than 15 points or anything like that. Sometimes it's not the amount of points that he gets, it's the timing of the points that he's scoring. Whether it's to stop a run that the Nuggets may be starting or to start a run or that dagger three, when, just before a timeout or things like that. Those are the things where, hopefully we can find a way from a Nugget standpoint to turn those types of things around. I think to me, those are probably the two guys. I mean, you could say Ant. I think we've done a relatively good job on Ant, to be honest with you. He is injured. You can clearly tell he's got a knee that's bothering him. Gobert, I think, one of the games he had 19 points, which I think that's kind of an anomaly. He's not going to be a guy who scores 20 points a game, but he kind of is in that same sense. He's going to score. If he scores 10 points, you got to make sure that those 10 points he scores aren't impactful points, because there's a difference between just scoring a layup, in the first quarter versus having impact points in the crunch time. And I think, to me, it's really those two main guys, DiVincenzo and McDaniels. Those are that's, like I said, that's the head of the snake. And if you can stop it at those two guys, it just alleviates that pressure that you were talking about from Murray and Jokic's standpoints.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm going to completely agree with you. I'm going to address the opposite side of that issue then too. So on the offensive end for us attacking them, it is super critical that those are two guys that you get in foul trouble pretty early. If you can get McDaniels, especially in foul trouble early, it gives Jamal a better opportunity to just operate relatively normally coming up the court. I mean, you can't have McDaniels pressing you up at half court. You can't do that. You're just not going to find yourself in any sort of favorable situation. And so I'm not saying I like the whole thing that the Nuggets kind of have, you see them do in recent games, which is where they try to foul bait. But I think if they genuinely are playing in the rhythm of their offense and taking it at them with the intention of creating contact, getting to the free throw line, getting points, stopping the clock, and getting those guys in foul trouble, then they're putting themselves in a position to succeed. They just have to. That's another thing we talked about last week too. You just have to, with a team that's larger than you and more physical, more athletic, younger than you are, you have to just make sure that they're on the court as little as they possibly can be. And so it is just super critical that if you're Jamal, you take it at McDaniels, try to get him off balance. Maybe, you're running a pick and roll action. Maybe you do a little step back head fake and you try to get him to jump and then you get to the free throw line that way. If he jumps into you or if he lands in your landing space, type of thing. It's just super critical that for Jamal, he attacks Jalen that way. And I mean, with DiVincenzo, it's kind of just weird that although DiVincenzo seems to be on Jamal a decent amount, it feels like McDaniels is covering him more than we thought he might. I think at the beginning of, not at the beginning of the episode, but last week on our episode, we talked about McDaniels kind of being a hover defender. They really do just like him up on Jamal an awful lot. And so DiVincenzo is probably better to attack from the defensive perspective, just making sure that you're making it hard for him to get good looks, because he's not necessarily the guy who's handling the ball most of the time, right? It's Anthony Edwards, making sure that Anthony can't get him good passes, right? Making it tough to get the ball to Dante DiVincenzo so that his shots are harder to make. I mean, it's just stuff like that that the Nuggets have to do. And if they play some more zone, maybe that'll help them a little bit. They had some success with it a little bit last night. It did kind of force Minnesota to adapt in a unique way. It's not been incredible historically this season when they use the zone, but it's worth just doing that so you can take away some of those passing lanes, or at least create harder passing lanes to get the ball to a guy like DiVincenzo in that type of situation. In the comments, we have someone also saying the same thing with Gobert. If we can get Gobert in foul trouble, it opens up a lot of opportunities for people like CB and Cam Johnson and Bruce Brown to attack the paint and drive. Yes, especially Christian Brown from three, right? It feels like Christian Brown has actually shot the ball pretty decently from deep when he's gotten some decent looks. And so, I mean, it comes back to just creating opportunities for Jokic to attack Gobert in the least stressful way possible. It would be harder without Aaron Gordon, but assuming you don't have Aaron Gordon, I mean, there are schematic ways I think that they could get around that and just give Joker an opportunity to take it at Gobert. It was kind of strange that obviously to start the game yesterday, Jokic took like the first 5 shots of the game, I think, right? That's not something we've really seen. And so personally, I'm a bigger fan of Jokic starting as the distributor and getting everyone else going. And then when he needs to, he just takes it right at Gobert. But I mean, if he comes out kind of like he did yesterday because he feels like he needs to get back in a rhythm with scoring, I don't see any reason why he couldn't be aggressive and take it right at Gobert and stop kind of with the cute little fadeaway shots and the little floaters. I think he just needs to kind of just take it right at him and get him in foul trouble. So I completely agree with this take. This is going to be very critical for the Nuggets. If they can get these critical guys who are giving them fits defensively in foul trouble, kind of like they were doing in game one, then they put themselves in a much better position to succeed. And so, yeah, as far as those role players are concerned, I completely agree with you. DiVincenzo and McDaniels in different ways, take away one offensively, take away one defensively. I think that will be very important for the Nuggets if they're going to truly turn this series around. As far as other aspects of this series, are there any other things that you're looking at that kind of just stand out to you as maybe things that have gone under the radar that might be important if the Nuggets are going to turn this series around?
I mean, to me, I think ball movement has always been the key to the Nuggets offense. It's been a lot of stagnant, a lot of one-on-one dribbling. And I've played basketball. I've had kids that played basketball. I've coached basketball. You cannot win against a good defensive team by playing one-on-one offense. You have to move the ball. And the Nuggets have had a lot of stagnant offense where, unfortunately, you see a lot of guys kind of looking at Joker or Jamal and saying they're going to do it, and I feel like that is something you kind of need. The commenter is right. You need like a Christian Brown or you need a Cam Johnson to step up and have a game. I do think that, you're right with Christian Brown as far as him being able to shoot from three. But, where I think his game really excels is he's, I don't know his exact stats this year, but I know he's very good in the fast break. He's usually a very good transition player. We get the ball out, we get the ball up court quickly, and usually you find him cutting to the rim and finishing. We haven't seen a whole lot of that really since the second quarter or since the first quarter of game 2. I think that's one of the things it goes under the radar, not under the radar, but you just get used to the flow of the game. You get used to that slower pace, and that's what Minnesota's done is they've really slowed the game down. I've been pleasantly surprised I don't know if surprised is a great word, but I've been okay with, we've seemingly taken relatively good care of the ball. I know there's spurts here and there where we're turning the ball over, but it's more our shot making and our efficiency, which is a weird thing to say because this was by far and away the most efficient team in the NBA all season. And so you have to think, if I'm looking at it through your lens, you have to think that that's more of an anomaly and that's going to change. Whereas for me, I kind of look at it from, the tip of the cap to Minnesota. What's going to change from Minnesota's standpoint? What are they going to be? What are the Nuggets going to do that's going to force Minnesota to play them differently? And I think it all starts with moving the ball. That's a huge piece. And, sometimes it's as simple as, we all ran it when we played, like AYL basketball, like the 3-man weave. I'm not saying they go out there and run a 3-man weave when they bring the ball up the court, but those are the kinds of things that they need to be doing, is working that passing, even bringing the ball up the court, because you can't just let Murray get banged on by McDaniels as he brings the ball up the court, and he's not getting the ball across half court until 6-7 seconds. And then you're late to get into your offensive set, and it starts everything off on the wrong foot. So the Nuggets have to find a way to move the ball better, whether that's setting screens, whether that's moving off the ball better. But that's, to me, something that's kind of gone a little bit under the radar. That just hasn't been discussed enough is ball movement.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point to bring up. Ball movement is super critical for sure. And to that point, when you're thinking about passes too, I mean, occasionally the Nuggets get caught making these sort of long cross-court passes. They got to stay connected. They're playing best when their passes are short and quick, and where guys are moving around each other, not just moving even in general. And so they really just need to reconnect as well, in addition to maximizing that passing ability. Very, very interesting to see if they'll be able to do that. I mean, this is something that they've kind of struggled with over the last few years also. It's just the case that when they're out of sync offensively, they get caught making lazier passes or handling the ball for too long, maybe not even making any passes at all on certain offensive possessions. And so they really do just need to get back to being connected offensively, running their little actions around, where they give the ball off to someone who's going to come back around, make a cut, handle the ball into the middle of the court, make a pass, kick out, whatever it is. That is the Denver Nuggets offense. And so they really need to get back to doing that. So great point about the passing. We got a few comments here as well in the meantime. Yeah, agreed. Okay, Joker should run the offense first and then look for his shots. It puts the Nuggets on their heels. It puts probably the Timberwolves on their heels.
Yep.
T-Wolves on their heels from the very beginning. Yeah, it does. That's what I said. I agree. I do. I like it when Joker gets everyone else involved first, because you need the supporting cast to play well. Okay, Joker didn't have a great game last night, but I think, like we've mentioned already, scoring 11 points in the first quarter is just going to doom you. You can't make 3 shots in the first quarter and expect to be competitive for the rest of that game. And so it wasn't just an issue that Joker wasn't making shots. It was just no one else was. And maybe that was on him a little bit for trying to come out early in this game and to just take so many shots to get in a rhythm offensively at the outset, because he'd been criticized for passing up that last shot at the end of game 2, that he just ended up sinking the rest of the offensive rhythm. And so I agree. I think Joker should run the offense first. Another comment here. TB is an amazing transition player, so we can get some good looks for him and up our pace while still being careful not to be sloppy and throw turnovers. That would be a huge X factor. Yeah, and that really starts with the rebounding, right? And so that's why you got to get Valanciunas out there so you can get in transition and run the fast break effectively, because that is definitely something that was missing from game 3. We got to get Christian Braun in those positions to be making those breakaway layups, those breakaway dunks. They're not just big in terms of points scored, but they're also big for the momentum of the game too, especially if he throws one down. So yeah, absolutely an X factor there. Another comment, no, Joker taking too many shots puts the, okay. I gotcha. I see. Yes. So yeah, him taking too many shots at the outset kind of gets them out of the offensive rhythm. I see. So we did kind of mention that too. I see what the commenter is saying now. You love to see it. Okay, let's move on into predictions. 2-1. We're right where I thought we would be. Not necessarily in the way that I thought we would be there, but I did say at this point in time the Nuggets would be down 2-1. Yeah, we got games 4 through 6. Presumably 4 through 6. Hopefully there's a game 6. Let's assume there's a game 6 upcoming this week. Walk us through what you think those games are going to look like, Eric. How do you think game 4 and game 5 are going to go? And then if there's a game 6, what's going to happen?
Well, I'll start by what I hope doesn't happen. The way that these games have played out, and I think they showed on Prime last night on the broadcast, that was the 31st time that these two teams have played in the last 3 years, and they were 15-15 each going into that game. Obviously now Timberwolves have a 16-15 one-up record on the Nuggets, but I think what we've seen a lot in those last 31 games is usually the team that jumps out to a super hot start in that first quarter, they get reeled back in and they are not able to keep that momentum up for the entire game. What I would like to see, especially starting in game 4, is I would like to see a little bit more balance. I would like to see, obviously we can't have another 11-point first quarter. But there's nothing wrong with, a 20 to 23 point first quarter. You just don't want to be buried, by 15 after the first quarter and have to dig yourself out of a hole. And I think that's where, if you break down these games by quarter, I think that's kind of what the Nuggets what their approach should be. Instead of looking at a daunting task, and at this point, look, we're down 1 game. That's not the end of the world. 2-1 is a relatively common, you're either going to be up 2-1 or you're going to be down 2-1. You're still going to have to figure out a way to win. It's the first to 4 for a reason. So nothing to go overboard, hairs on fire type of thing. These guys have been here before. They know what it takes to win in the NBA. So I'm confident from that standpoint. What I think they should do though is break the games down by quarter and just go out there and try to win every quarter that they can. That kind of, not having to look too far into the future, really stay focused on the things that are happening in front of you right now. I think that's going to help as they kind of try to navigate their way back into this series. Ultimately, the final score last night was 113-96. On paper, that doesn't sound so bad, but the people that watched that game, you were scratching your eyes out because that game hurt to watch. That was not a good watch. It was not fun to watch. It was way worse than that score indicated. You really don't want to see Minnesota carry over momentum. So I was pleasantly, pleased, I guess, that we kind of narrowed it down a little bit in that fourth quarter. I know it was a lot of bench players. It was that Zeke Najee's and the Julian Strothers kind of, we'll call it garbage time. But in the NBA playoffs, I don't know that there's such thing as garbage time because you're trying to win a championship. And sometimes you're not going to win every game along the way unless you're, the whatever year Jordan was playing the 96 Bulls or 2016 Warriors. Those guys won every game, but that's not how this Nuggets team is built, and that's not what's going to happen. They're going to be in for a long stretch, and that's what they have to kind of play for is, turning this into a 6 and 7 game series because Minnesota's in the same boat. They know who they're playing. They're very familiar with one another, and each team knows each other's tendencies. We've all seen the clip where Ant-Man was talking about how it was insane that Jokic was calling their play while they were running their play. That's how well these two teams know each other. And so it's going to take, focus and really trying to be determined to not let that game get away in the first quarter, because when you're on the road, if it gets away from you in the first quarter, it's really difficult to fight your way back. And that's where it's kind of hats off to the Timberwolves. They did that here in Denver. So that should just be proof for the Nuggets that it is possible. If you do get put in a hole, you can dig your way back and you can, find a way to victory. But I think, kind of what they need to do is try to get some space for Jamal, try to get Joker, to see some shots go in early, to get the ball movement, to get the, maybe a dunk by Christian Brown, maybe an open three-pointer by Cam Johnson, to get that confidence going, because confidence, like I said earlier, is one of those tricky things. It comes and it goes in the NBA, and when you have it, it's like a magical bean. When you have that confidence, you're going to step up and you're going to hit shots that maybe you weren't hitting in the previous games. The good news for the Nuggets is we've yet to see a super explosive game from Minnesota. Our defense has done a pretty good job. So it's really just fixing those things on offense that I think that they can do and get themselves back in the series. So, I would really like to see the Nuggets win game 4, and then at that point, we've got a series because both teams have won on the other team's home court. I'm not saying we don't have a series right now. It feels like a series, but if the Nuggets can win tomorrow night, kind of in prime time, get their swagger back, I think that's going to go a long way into kind of building into what they need to do in games 5 and hopefully 6 and, potentially game 7 if we get there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, man. You love to see it. To the point about the quarters and the quarter emphasis, as far as them focusing during the game, it's interesting that during the times where they seem to have played best this year, it feels like this is the rhythm. Feels like they come out of the game pretty strong, usually within 5 or so points, either up or down. Then they bring the bench in, and the bench kind of just surrenders an awful lot of that momentum. Probably late into the second quarter. Then the starters come back in. Obviously, it's the playoffs, so this is going to be a little bit different. But then the starters come back in, and the starters get it back to within that sort of 5 or so point range going into halftime. Then the third quarter, they come out, they make their adjustments, and they just hammer. The third quarter is huge for the Nuggets if they're going to be successful. This year, they have been a really good third quarter team. They have to be an excellent team in the third quarter if they're going to be able to compete. And then the fourth quarter, usually since the third quarter goes so well, they just need to hold on to their lead in the fourth quarter. Although they had been playing as one of the better clutch teams in the NBA at the end of the regular season, although a lot of those games were against a little bit weaker competition. So I guess we'll see how their thematic sort of rhythm of play goes in game 4. But I think that's what they kind of need to get back to. So whatever those rotations end up being, whoever ends up being out there on the court with whatever certain matchups based on whatever the Timberwolves throw out there, it'll really just have to align with that rhythm so the Nuggets can maximize their ability to keep their momentum and just kind of play the way they've been playing this season, especially when they've been playing well. So that'll be important for them. I don't really have any other takeaways. I think we've covered pretty much everything that there is to cover about this last week and this upcoming next few games. As far as game 4, I'm going to stick to my current prediction, the prediction I made last week. I think the Nuggets win game 4. I don't think I made a specific prediction about the score in that game, although I did say it would be another pretty close one, probably within 5 points. And so I'm going to stick to that. I think that it probably doesn't exceed 115 in scoring in game 4. And I think the Nuggets win by about 5 points. So that'll be my prediction for game 4. For game 5, they're going to come back home. They're going to win game 5. I think they'll win game 5 by maybe 10 or so. I think they'll figure it out. They'll get their momentum back. Game 5 is a 10-point win. Maybe we see upper 110s again from the Nuggets in that win. Maybe it looks a little bit like game 1. Then they go back to Minnesota. Minnesota in game 6, that'll be a win for Minnesota, probably by 10 or so, maybe 15. Then it'll come down to game 7 again. I'm going to say the Nuggets win game 7. I'm going to say the Nuggets win game 7 probably in close fashion, probably within 10 points. But I do think the Nuggets win in 7. And that might be with or without Aaron Gordon. Obviously, with Aaron Gordon would be better. We need AG back or it's over. It looks that way, especially if Valanciunas doesn't find his way into the rotation. They're just not going to be able to compete. They're not big enough. And if they can't start shooting the ball better, they're just going to be completely torched again, like they were in game 3. So I'm really anticipating either Aaron plays in game 4 or Valanciunas gets a significant amount more minutes, because it's going to have to be either or ideally both if the Nuggets are going to compete with the size of Minnesota. This other commenter agrees. We need AG to win versus these guys. Yeah, that makes sense. It just does. You need the size, right? Like we've said multiple times on this show. 112-105 Nuggets for game 4. That is a perspective I can get behind. I like that. I'm going to go 109-106. That'll be my actual game prediction for game 4. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, any other closing thoughts for this episode, my friend?
The one thing I always told my kids when we were playing, your number one ability is availability. And I agree with all the comments around Aaron Gordon. We need him available if the Nuggets want to make a run. Even forget about just this series. If we want to talk about a championship, type of team, they're not going to get there without Aaron Gordon. That's for sure. So hopefully we do see him available, and I can definitely get back on board with the Nuggets. It was just some things that I saw that I think we need to make some tweaks here and there, but. Look, this team is good enough to do it. So it'll be exciting tomorrow. I think everybody will be locked to their TVs, come 6:30 tomorrow afternoon.
Absolutely. Yes, they will. And I mean, we've been saying since the beginning of this season, the Nuggets can win the championship this season if they stay healthy. And unfortunately, that's the one thing they haven't done yet. But I'm not giving up hope yet. I'm not going to give up hope. We will see how it goes. But thank you for another amazing discussion with me tonight, Eric. It was good to have you back. And thank you to everyone who listened to this episode and commented in our comment section. We appreciate the viewership. We appreciate the listenership. And until next Friday, have a fantastic week. Go Nuggets. Hopefully they can pull out 2 of the next 3 games that they play. And hopefully we're making game 7 predictions this time next week. So till then, take care and peace out.
Go Nuggets.